Hello everyone, this is Jason Killingsworth, founder of Tune and Fairweather, and it's been a little while since I've come to you in this form, and that's because I wanted to experiment with something new. I've been doing a lot of the backer updates, and even though it hurts my feelings a little bit when people use phrases like too long, didn't read, I understand that a wall of text sometimes is a little bit less enjoyable to consume, even though we're here to talk about a 352-page book. So we'll just ignore the irony there and jump right in to the update. So you may be wondering what's happening behind the scenes right now. You've paid your money, you've backed the Kickstarter for You Died, and now you have to wait several months for that book to arrive. And some of you may be wondering why it takes several months, because you printed something on your computer just the other day, and it took about 20 seconds for it to just come off the inkjet printer, and so you're wondering, this is such an easy thing, why does it take several months to hit print? Well, I want to bring you inside the publishing process. Hopefully you enjoy a little bit of insight into that behind the scenes. So let's start with the spec, because that's the stage that we're in right now. It is somewhat excruciating because of the level of detail, but this is the back and forth process with our printer, and it's fortunately, even though they're based in Italy, their English is very good, so that hasn't been too much of a hurdle. But there have been a lot of emails back and forth between them and our production manager, Matt. Obviously I've been involved in that process as well, and we are getting very close to a final spec. And the spec is the essentially the book version of your architectural drawings for building a house, which are obviously very detailed, and you want it to be incredibly precise, because once you put up a house, if a wall goes up in the wrong place, then that's not good. And we really have taken so many pains to make sure that this book is as perfect as we can possibly make it, and so that just means that we take extra care in this stage, because once the printer runs, then if it comes out a shade, the cover is purple, then we have to ship you a purple book. Or actually, we wouldn't ship that out. We just save it as a special collector's edition. I don't know what we do, but we're going to make sure that doesn't happen. So this is a printout of, the subject line says "Final Spec for Dark Souls book," and I'll give you a very quick sample of just some of the language in here, because it is somewhat technical, and I've actually been really enjoying the process of learning what's what, because even though I've worked in publishing for a long time, I haven't been the person working directly with the printer to handle the technical aspects of creating that printed product. So I'm learning a lot as I go through the process, which is really fun. So we have so many editions of this book that multiplies the level of complexity. So Andrew, our designer, and we sat down on a call yesterday and just went line by line through each edition, because as you know, those are going to change, depending on whether it's the standard black edition or whether it's the Way of White edition. So this has things like the dimensions, the closed dimensions, 234 millimeters by 176 millimeters. It has all those measurements. It has the number of pages, 352, 4 by 4, which is just the colors in the CMYK color spectrum that are being used to print, and then spot varnish on 140 GSM Magno Natural. And Magno Natural, that is just the kind of paper that we're going to be using for this edition. So even just that tiny little detail of the paper, that took a bit of time going back and forth with the printer, because you don't want to just look through a list of names and say, oh, that's a nice sounding name, we'll use that paper. You really want to see a sample of every different key component of the book, because even though it's a little thing, it's obviously the level of quality of the experience of reading this book is going to be the sum total of a huge number of tiny little details in terms of the touch, you know, how the ink looks on the page, how the cover feels in your hand. That's the beauty of a physical product, is that you have a chance to engage all of these different senses, whereas in the digital domain you kind of have auditory, you know, visual, but you lose that tactile and some of those, and even the smell. You know, that's one of the beauties of old books and things, that you even have that slight bit of mustiness when you pull it off the shelf, and it's, you know, there are a few molecules from all of the rooms that book has, you know, existed in over the course of its lifetime, and those actually, you inhale those and it becomes part of you in a weird way, which, like, you can get a little bit tripped up on the metaphysics of that. But anyway, that's a huge digression. So let me pull up example. We looked at a number of different types of paper. This is the one that we ended up going with. It is an uncoated paper. So if you've ever looked at an art book, and most art books are what's called a coated paper, which means that there is a gloss over each page, and that's usually done just because the inks on the page have more vibrance and shininess to them. It's a easy way of getting a really high contrast brilliance to those images. And even though we are, you know, we have a lot of beautiful full color images throughout the book, we don't want the feel of an art book because coated paper feels synthetic. You know, if grab an art book off your shelf, even nice ones like the Dark Souls Design Works books, the pages, it doesn't feel like paper almost, it feels like sheets of plastic that you're turning. So we wanted to try to get the best of both worlds and have a paper that was uncoated and had a natural feel. You can actually feel the wood grain, but it's still with a smooth page, because we want that smoothness of, you know, just as your fingers are leafing, you know, through the book, and if you run your hand over the page, we still want it to have a nice elegant smoothness to it, while also preserving, you know, some of the, you know, the brilliance of the imagery. So we looked at this, and even though this isn't the best example because it doesn't have really bright reds and greens and such, but like this page is just a scan of a notebook, and the colors are surprisingly crystal clear, even though it's on an uncoated paper. So this was this is what we went with. This is the Magno Natural. And we looked at a number of other books. This was another one of them that you may have seen in a photo that I posted in a previous update. This is a book that was printed on a heavier stock paper. There's a nice Mirror's Edge illustration there, but this is uncoated paper, and it's this has a very rustic kind of feel. It's, you know, the pages are quite chunky, and it's not reflective. It has this very artisanal kind of handmade feel to it. However, I didn't like this just because you can even see it as the pages are very stiff. They are, I can't remember what the GSM on this was. I think it was 180. So what we've done is we didn't want something this kind of rigid. We wanted a smoother, because obviously these are, you know, you're going to be reading over a length of time, and we want the pages to fall in a really nice, smooth fashion rather than kind of plunking over. So we actually lowered the paper stock, and even though that seems like we're actually losing quality because we're using a thinner paper, it enhances the quality of the reading experience itself, because the pages are just going to fall a little bit more fluidly. And yeah, so that's what that sample helped us figure out. And then last sample is, this is a book that our printer sent us called Illusions, The Art of Magic. And the reason they sent us this one is because, I don't know if you can see it in the light, the window here, but this has the stamped deboss. And I think in the initial Kickstarter video I said that the front was going to have this beautiful emboss on it. Emboss was not the correct word, so I was kind of betraying my ignorance there slightly. An emboss is when it's punched up through the back of the page that creates a raised impression, and a deboss is when you stamp into the top of something to get depth, but it's in a recess. So this is an example of a deboss where they have stamped the word illusions into the front of the book, obviously and then they've actually put stamped a black foil into those grooves. So there's a slight, when you run your hand over the cover of the book, there's a slight indentation where each one of the letters is. And then by stamping black foil into those recesses, you don't just have the sculpted shapes of the letters, but you also have this slight glimmer to the letters, which obviously for illusions, it gives it this kind of, there's something hidden that you can see in the right light, so it fits with the theme of the book. However, on this book, the depth of the deboss is very shallow, and so you can just feel it very slightly when you run your hand over the cover. But we wanted, I think I mentioned it in one of the backer updates, but our designer said he wanted to be able to grate cheese on the cover, which I'm never going to stop quoting because it's just a hilarious image of rubbing cheese against the cover of your book, which we don't recommend, by the way. And if you do take a slab of Parmesan and rub it all over the front of You Died, we will not be refunding you the cost of that book. So to get back to the depth of the deboss, that sample helped us realize that that we love the kind of way that the light plays off that black foil stamping into those letters, but we want something that just has a bit more texture to it, that we want a sculptured feel, kind of a sculpted feel, where this just feels like a very slight kind of tactile impression. So we had another book called Cold Eye, and that book is not in my possession because I posted it to the printer just to let them know that it had a much deeper impression. So we just let them know that we wanted to try to achieve that depth. And a lot of times it's a little bit of a testing, guessing game, and takes some experimentation to figure out exactly how to get some of these details right, because for example, with the depth of the impression, we don't know if that other book just had a softer, these are called the boards, and that the covering is wrapped over. And so we don't know if that just, the machine just was calibrated to stamp in a stronger fashion, or if that was just a more pliable, softer board and that took a deeper impression. So yeah, so these samples have kind of traveled around the world and back. Fortunately not the world, or the estimated shipping for the book would be sometime in 2024, but Conti, our printer in Florence, Italy, they shipped that sample to Andrew, our designer in the UK, and then he shipped it to me to have a look at so I could make a final call on that. And then I ended up sending it back to the printer so they can make sure that they're using that as a reference. So that is that. But we are using the color of that cloth for You Died, for the black edition. And so Andrew and I got on a call yesterday and went line by line through this email, which the subject line is Final Spec for Dark Souls book. And we've had a number of back and forth emails with the printer, just nailing down some of these things. And we noted a few discrepancies, one of them being the fact that the end papers, and if you are not familiar with the kind of the parts of the book, there's a really nice book by McSweeney's Press here, Icelander by Dustin Long, and hopefully this shows up on camera. Okay, but you'll see the end papers are just the papers that cover the inside of the binding. So the binding wraps around, and then you put the end papers over the top of it just to give gives you a nice front and back. Kind of a lot of nicer books will have a pattern on there. Actually, this is the next one. Habibi by Craig Thompson. Amazing, a really beautiful book. And so in his end papers, these tend to be subtle because you don't really want it to yell at you when you open the book. It's just supposed to give a nice kind of quiet ambiance as you start reading or open up and flip past it, but this has kind of refuse and rubbish and cardboard, plastic and rusty barrels floating through the water. That's one of the themes of the book, is this idea of contamination and filth and how beauty stands out against that background. And so those are the end papers, and we realized that in the final spec that was sent to us that it had black paper, 140 GSM black Magno natural for the end papers, and we need that pattern printed onto white because you may remember it from the initial Kickstarter campaign page, but you saw that image of the end papers with all of those symbols and these kind of swirling concentric patterns, and we want those images to, like the negative space that's not printed on, we want those to really pop. So that's one thing we need to correct with them. And so, oh yeah, on the leather editions, we want it to have the kind of the pliability of an old Bible. This is an old family Bible that I bought at a charity shop in Kilkenny. It's amazing. It was printed in the early 1900s, and it actually, inside of the Bible, it has a receipt from the Imperial War Graves Commission, dated 1921, and this was the order from the mother who had buried her son who had died in combat. So this has the details that she wants engraved on his gravestone. And so it has the cost per letter and 16 letters for Captain Ambrose A. Shearman. So that was the reason I pulled this out is because the old family Bible is one of the inspirations for the leather edition of You Died, and we put the type in red letter for Miyazaki's words as a reference to old Bibles that would have Jesus's words in red, so that you could kind of pick those out, and we thought it would be nice to honor Miyazaki with that same kind of treatment. And this has this particular Bible has what's called a gilding, which is, hopefully you can see it, it's somewhat dusty. I didn't take the time to do a massive cleaning on this before hitting record, but it has this gold sort of ink coating along the page edges, and we use that same technique on the editions of the book. However, for the black leather edition, we use silver. We have silver gilding, and so that was one of the things that we didn't initially have planned, but because the Kickstarter was so successful, we wanted to figure out ways to raise the overall quality of the product, just to really pay back that investment by raising the standard of the product that we're shipping out, trying to make it even nicer. And so we noticed that it was missing that page edge gilding on the faux leather edition. So one of the things a decision we made recently was that we want to print some faux leather editions. A alongside the genuine leather editions, so that there's an option for somebody who might want to get the Gravelord edition at some point in the future, but has ethical concerns about genuine leather. Sort of half of our run of leather copies are going to be genuine leather, and then half are going to be that faux leather, which is going to look really nice. It's going to look beautiful, and it's going to have a really nice texture, but it's not going to be obviously have the cow in there. Don't know how else to say it. And so we noticed on the leather copies that it had the hardback boards, and that was one thing. Since we wanted that feel of the old family Bible, we didn't want it to have a really hard, stiff cover with just the leather coated over it. We wanted it to have some pliability, so it had that kind of feel. So those were the kinds of things that we caught, and then we'll go back to the printer now and tweak those variables. But yeah, it's really exciting to see all of the tiny details, because just the length of the spec, just even that fact shows how many little touches there are to this. This is not just a simple, hardcover, slap together kind of thing. There's a lot of really specific, detailed design features, and so there are going to be differences between the black edition and the Way of White edition. Just some slight variations, like we're going to have a red bookmark ribbon in the black edition, and that ribbon will be gold in the Way of White edition. So we didn't want to just have the same color ribbon in every single one. We wanted to really differentiate that prestige cover variant, so that it has a really nice distinct feel for people who bought both copies. We want to reward that investment by giving two things that really have their own personality, and that's going to be reflected in some of those. And they're not able to do we want to do a very tiny limited run of even just 10 copies of a white leather edition, and they weren't able to source that, so we're just going to for those 10 copies, we're just going to get what are called the book blocks, which is just the book itself without the binding, and then we'll finish those ourselves with a separate vendor at some point in the future. But because the stone sarcophagus didn't sell during the actual Kickstarter, we do want to produce one later, so there's not as much rush on that. But so we should be finalized with the spec probably by early next week, and then once we have that finalized, we'll go ahead and get the deposit paid. They can order the paper for the book, which obviously is a massive quantity, because we're not just printing the number of books that we're still funded in the Kickstarter, but we're doing a larger round of 5,000 copies, so there's going to be additional copies that we'll be able to sell on the website, and that's a lot of paper. So it takes a few weeks for the paper to arrive, and I'll follow up with another update once we have the exact timing of when things are going to be coming back from the printer. But it looked like it took 3 or 4 weeks for for the paper order to come in, and then roughly another month for the book to get bound. All right, so I just want to finish up talking about the box, since we were already on the leather edition, talking about the Gravelord Servant edition. We have found a vendor for the box. We're working with a local Irish craftsman named Thomas, who has a company called The Wood Company, and so we have finalized and booked in our order of the boxes. And let me show you these are some boxes that I had in my collection. I bought one share of Brewdog stock and to get some free beer, and so they sent one of their beers in this box, and then I just had one of these other promotional boxes, and these are pretty common now. You'll see them on like bottles of wine, and it's it adds this touch of class, and to have these slide top boxes that reveal, the item within. This one is actually a bit smoother than this one, but I think these are kind of cheap, and like the engraving doesn't look like good quality wood. You can just see the little nails that are stamped in, and even though they're very common and sometimes they have very nice objects inside, I wanted something that really felt was a bit more auspicious and just felt like there was something really precious inside. And to me, these felt like the kind of cheaper end of like the IKEA flat pack range, and I don't want Toon and Fairweather to be associated with that kind of level of just 1,000 of those, not spit out of a machine in 10 minutes. So the reference that I've been using is something more like this rather than a slide top box. This is I've had since university, and this is just a humidor that it has a cigar that I'm saving for a special occasion, and a gorgeous smell that comes out of the wood has trapped all of those scents of the various tobacco that's been in here. But I love this feeling of the hinged lid that sits open, and then it has a latch as well. And you see this on a lot of jewelry boxes, and this is much closer to what I wanted for the Graveyard Servant editions. So, and they agree, and so we've settled on a hinge top with a latch, and we're going to use oak for the box itself. It's a really beautiful hardwood, and will have a lot of structural integrity, and also just be an incredibly nice object, rather than the just that pine, sort of unfinished pine. I know I did say the pine box edition, I think, on some of the wording, so hopefully you'll forgive me when it's not actual pine. Oak will be a lot nicer. Pine box, since it was called the coffin, it felt right to play on that idea of pine, but pine is a very soft wood, and it's not quite as nice, and that's why they throw it up mostly for fencing and things like that. So another point on the Graveyard Servant box, and sorry for going on so long about the box, but because I know it's a relatively small number of you who actually ordered that item, but for the 44 of you who did, it's going to be absolutely amazing, and we're going to have the engraving, that pattern, on the top of the box, and it will be a larger box than this, obviously, because it's going to be a fairly substantial book. And for the finishing technique on the box, we are leaning towards using a finishing technique called, I'm probably going to butcher the name, but Shugi Oban. It's a Japanese technique where they use a open flame to scorch the wood to give it this beautiful black charred appearance. And we think that will, first of all, look amazing, but second of all, just since Dark Souls is so much about fire, and even in the prologue, when you see the Sisters of Chaos, you see the flame kind of rising up behind them, and in the center of the earth, fire and burning, and the bonfire that is burning eternally. It's not technically eternally because the Age of Dark is coming, but that idea of fire just fits so well with not just the finishing technique on the box, but it being a traditional Japanese technique, and the game being designed and created in Japan. It felt like those things just thematically all wrapped together. That just makes my heart really happy when you get something that is resonant on all those multiple levels at the same time. So I am incredibly excited about that, if you couldn't tell. I'm excited. And I think the last thing I'll just sneak into this update is the poster, because we are working with another Irish vendor. We want Tune and Fairweather to not just be Irish in name only. We have Dublin, Ireland on the copper coin, which I have one sitting over here. So there's the copper coin. It says Dublin, Ireland on here. I am sitting here in my upstairs office in my home on the south side of Dublin. It's incredibly gusty and windy today, just because the weather is fairly dramatic in this country. But I don't want to just be Irish in name only, kind of have this like made in Cupertino kind of just slightly hollow gesture, just saying made in USA, but really it's just the design, and then everything else is done in China or some other huge manufacturing hub. So I want to work with local craftsmen and women to create some of these items. So the box, I'm thrilled that we're working with this local woodworker whose Instagram I've been drooling over for years, and I finally have an excuse to collaborate with them. And very fortunately for us, they just got the engraving machine that we need to do the etchings on the top of the inside of the box, and that's going to be up and running in just 2 days, I think. So the timing was perfect in terms of linking up with them. And then the poster, we're working with another local Dublin printer named Damn Fine Print, and they do these gorgeous screen prints, fine art quality, and we've been going back and forth with them on the type of paper. Same as the printing on the book, you want to take a lot of time to make sure you have just the right paper, and so we were going for the limited edition You Died print. We're using a paper called Birch, which is this beautiful cream colored paper, and then we'll be putting the red and black over the top. And Andrew's finishing up the design of the mother and child, which was the final very work intensive piece of that design. What you saw on the Kickstarter page was a mock-up, and that was mostly finished, but the mother and child was kind of a placeholder piece that was not commensurate with the level of quality of the N. Orlando architecture behind it. He has spent 2 weeks now just working on the mother and child, that focal point on the image. He said he is probably 1 day of work from done, which is really exciting, because then we'll be able to send that to the printer and get those posters made. And then we're also working with them on the variant edition of the poster, which is a black paper with a gold print on top of that, and so that will be the one that will be available on the website. Obviously, the only people who will get that red, black, and cream tricolor version will be people who have backed the Kickstarter or ordered it as an add-on or pre-order on the BackerKit website. So I know I'm sneaking in additional things as they come to mind, but thank you to everyone who has filled out your pledge survey on the BackerKit website. I think there are just 100. We have 1,500 completed surveys, so we know all of your addresses where we're going to be posting these books to you at. And there's just 100 stragglers who haven't had a chance to fill out those surveys yet, or haven't gotten the emails. If you haven't gotten an email about it, then just get in touch with us at contact@tuneandfairweather.com, or you can reach out via the Kickstarter. Just send a direct message on the Kickstarter website, and we'll send you a link directly so that you can fill that out. If you don't fill it out, we won't be able to send you the book, and it'll cause delays in getting your order. So we don't want that at all. So I know I've banged on about it at length, and my follow-up email that I sent out in the last backer update, it confused a lot of you who'd already filled out your surveys because you felt like I was harassing you to fill it out when you already had. So I apologize. I was really just following up with that limited number of people who hadn't gotten around to it. So I won't make that mistake again. So apologies for cluttering your inbox with that one. And I think that's it for now. Tune in Fairweather now has a VAT registration number. So even in this process, as we're working on the book and getting that finalized, we're also becoming a legit company at the same time, which is exciting and scary, but really, really amazing because it's the amazing support that came through for the Kickstarter that's giving us the opportunity to launch this company. And to the original backers who, even though we'll have campaigns in the future for special projects that we do in the days ahead, but the people who backed this first campaign will be near to my heart till my last breath. It sounds dramatic, but I really am that thankful because this company, these snakes, the meaning that they have for me personally, and being able to create something beautiful to leave, put out into the world as a creative legacy is really special to me. So thank you for making it happen. And we'll wrap up this update here. And I hope you enjoyed it. And I'll talk to you soon. See ya.